Cybersecurity for the financial year 2023 to 2024, powered by AmbiSure Technologies in association with CXO Junction. For this, we have Mr. Kalpesh Doshi, who is the Group CISO at HDFC Life, and Mr. Ajay Bhayani, who is the Director Security at AmbiSure Technologies, who will be delivering this power-packed fireside chat. By the way, to introduce myself, my name is Iqbal Qureshi. I'm a manager B2B operations from CXO Junction. Talking about CXO Junction, as you all know, it is a community for enterprise leader to come and discuss the evolving scene of cybersecurity and risk management. In order to facilitate these discussions, we partner with many subject matter experts. Likewise, today we have partnered with AmbiSure Technologies for this fireside chat, talking and introducing about our today's powered sponsors, who is the AmbiSure Technologies. So AmbiSure Technologies is a privately held firm specializing in cybersecurity. They are on a mission to deliver next generation cybersecurity solution and services which align with business goal and comply with industry standards. Their IT security solution offering includes threat prevention solution, threat detection and management solution, business enablement solutions. They work closely with companies offering IT infrastructure to extend cutting-edge security solution for enterprise, consumers, and governments and e-commerce companies. And don't forget to stay us till the end of the session, wherein we'll be having 3 lucky winners today who will be getting a chance to win CXO Junction goodies. First winner will be on the basis of amazing question asked, which will our speakers will be nominating that name. Second winner will be on the basis of Wheel of Fortune, on the basis of LinkedIn comments, which my team will be putting at 12 p.m. And third winner will be on the basis of Wheel of Fortune, on the basis of feedback form. So stay tuned till the end of the session, sit back, relax, and enjoy this amazing fireside chat. So I would now like to hand over the stage to Mr. Ajay Bhayani to take this forward. Over to you, Mr. Ajay, sir.
Thank you, Iqbal. Thanks a lot for this wonderful introduction. And talking about LinkedIn, yes, we are live on LinkedIn today, and we will be definitely looking ahead at interactions happening in the LinkedIn as well. So we'll be picking up questions from the Zoom as well as LinkedIn. So if you want to make things active, please keep on sharing questions on both the platforms. Myself and Iqbal will be taking up those questions. Great, Dan. So today, thanks a lot, guys. So welcome back on the 2-part series of our planning cybersecurity budget for financial year 2023 and 24. Last month, we had a great discussion with our industry veteran, Gupta Boda sir, and he was really instrumental to give us a great insight on how a CISO should plan a budget depending on its industry for a financial year, and how that can be really taken to create a complete cybersecurity roadmap for an organization. We also discussed on how a budget approval process will be working, as well as how the management communications should happen. But today we are going to go more deeper and understand what is going to be a more dynamics of cybersecurity budgeting with a lot of use cases. And if you have any use cases and have any concerns about it and what needs to be done, please feel free to ask us in the chat or on the LinkedIn Live, and we definitely will try and answer as much as possible during the session or post the session as well. Now, for this discussion, I'm absolutely honored to have our esteemed guest who has, worked on all 3 dimensions of cybersecurity, right? When I say all 3 dimensions, he has been a cybersecurity consultant, he has been an implementer, as well as a vendor in cybersecurity. And today he is a CISO, right? With a tremendous experience of 25 years with implementing and working on security from very day one. He has worked with companies like Pidilite, Accenture, HSBC, Capgemini, FIS, and today he is a group CISO of HDFC Life, a person whom I always consider as a proper CISO package. Welcome, Kalpesh Doshi, group CISO of HDFC Life. Thanks a lot for joining us on the discussion of planning cybersecurity budget for financial year 23-24.
Thanks, Ajay, for the very warm introduction. And a good morning, everyone. I know Saturdays are not really for work, but I was not expecting a huge turnaround that I'm seeing right now, but I'm really excited. And I look forward to sharing my experience, my learnings. Always believe it's a journey. Nobody knows 100%, but I'm very glad to share whatever I know. And I'm hopeful that I learn a bit more from the esteemed community that we have on this call and many on the LinkedIn. So look forward to our interaction today.
Perfect. And same here, we are also expecting a lot of queries coming in as much as possible, right? So we'll try to keep this as interactive as possible, Kalpesh. Now, just to start, what I want, what we will be having as a part of this discussion, we'll be doing a lot of case study discussions is what I'm looking at. And there are a list of questions which I have, right? But before that, I want you to set up a context and, if you have a presentation, we can go ahead and share the screen now. And what we can do is we can, you can set the context and then we can take up the question. So you have 15 to 20 minutes and yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Ajay. Let me just share my screen and let me know once everybody is able to see my screen.
Yes, it's visible.
Great.
It's visible.
Perfect. So getting started, I think like always, a disclaimer, these are my personal views. HDFC Life is not into business of selling cyber plans or security services, needless to say that. But again, these are my personal views that I look forward to sharing with my community, our fraternity, right? And they anyways do not imply that they are my organization's view in any which ways. Getting really started about whenever we talk about budgets, right? Budgets is nothing but looking into the future. It's looking into the future, learning from the past, right? And also a very fair assessment of your present scenarios, right? So a lot of factors will always contribute to what should be the budget for 2023 or 2024, right? So it would always be driven. And as I said, it goes back into what has happened in the past, right? Which would then define what should be the actions to secure yourselves from the future and even some of the forecast. So what I really have right now is what I'm sure every individual who's planning for the budgets would think about it or would have at the top of their minds. All right. So why is cyber important? Because we are seeing about 300 billion passwords are being used by humans and machines all over the world, right? And let's be honest about it, right? With so many passwords to remember, right? No matter how intelligent we may be, no matter how hard we try, there is a trouble remembering the passwords, right? And as more and more devices get connected, right? As in more and more services gets introduced, it only keeps on getting more and more difficult, right? So we're talking about 300 billion passwords, right? Used by machines and humans all across. We've also seen a very steep rise in terms of cybersecurity incidents, right? Breaches are very common nowadays. And I always believe those days are gone, when, you used to call out, oh, you are being breached. So something is really wrong out there. It's now everybody realizes that the complete dark web, the adversary market is a well-oiled machinery. And it's just a matter of time when everybody at some time will be breached, right? So every organization, those days are gone, when you could say that I have implemented a next generation firewall and I cannot be breached. There are no Fort Knox in this world, right? Everything can be breached, and we've seen that. SolarWinds really proved the point that every organization, right, including the Fort Knox, can be compromised if there is an intent, right? Uh, Again, most statistics, it talks about your macros, or your attached business email compromise. Again, when you go back to every statistics, when it talks about breaches, business email compromise would contribute as a major component, right? Security markets are growing, 170.4 billion by 2022. That's what Gartner estimates. And I'm sure it will go above and beyond. One thing that's really fueling, the investments in cyber or security is there has been a sudden rush to digital, because what really happened during COVID times, it was not only about the resilience, but it also kind of opened up businesses to new avenues of doing business for future. Every business realized the potentials of cloud, the potentials of digital, right? And we are seeing that every organization, while we are coming out of COVID, we have come out of COVID, but there is a huge push for digital initiatives. Now, whether it is aligned for a CX, we call it a customer experience, or engaging with the customers, we all understand that we are gradually moving from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. And what was Web 2.0? It was more in terms of creating those interactions, right? Web 1 was static, where you just had a page, it showed about your products, that's about it. A Web 2.0, it created opportunities for interactions, chatbots, right? Or somewhere, we were trying to customize, the experience for the customers. That was Web 2.0. What are we talking about Web 3.0? Web 3.0 is all context-based. ChatGPT, a classic example of what a Web 3.0 could do. It's really redefining, right? To the extent that it's been contemplated, can ChatGPT replace humans? So that's a level of interaction, that's a level of use of AI, right? That's going to go into your, I would say, into your digital programs or your initiatives. And that would really add a whole lot of new context. While we see all of this, what would really happen is you have to collect a lot of data, because you have to make sense. You have to collect the data so that there is an opportunity for doing the AI or ML, right? So we are going to really see that this is continuing to increase, right? I think when I started, and Ajay Bhai did mention that when I started my journey about 24, 25 years back, cyber was never even a function that was identified as a need to have function. In fact, it used to, I used to have pains explaining people that I'm in security, because it was very common to believe that if it's security, it is physical security. So like the reactions would be, hey, are you a physical security guard? And it took pains for us to explain that no, there's something like IT security. Uh, there was no IT function. Being very honest, when I started my journey, we always had EDP. So from that time to today, there has been a massive change. Why I'm saying this is, I usually hear people saying that cyber budgets are difficult. Yes, they are difficult. But if you really talk to somebody who started the journey 2 decades or even a decade back, cyber was not even a boardroom agenda item. Today, I can very safely say every board, right? Every board meeting I have attended, had the privilege of attending even meetings of a lot of large banks, where I had the privilege of serving them as a consultant. I've seen that cyber is on top of everybody's agenda. The board is really worried about cyber. It remains to be one of the top 5 risks even today. And they definitely are concerned, and they are, they are curious to know what is an organization doing to protect itself. There is a shift happening even there, where it used to be earlier, we should not be breached. So the idea was zero breaches. It is still an idea. It is a desirable state. But now I have also seen the boards are maturing, and there is a shift in the focus which says, if we are breached, what are we going to do about it? It might mean very little in terms of the words, but it signifies a huge shift where cyber was just, uh, and I'm sure a lot of people will resonate. Cyber budget was a leftover of IT budgets, right? To the fact that today we are moving into, I would say an arena, right? Where cyber is a different budget, where it's documented, where people do an elaborate exercise to figure out what should be the cyber strategy for your organization. So there is a huge shift there. right? 86% breaches were financially driven, while 10% were motivated by espionage. Espionage, again, when I see all of this, always consider insider threat. Uh, and you also have to factor that today, the lines of perimeter security have been completely blurred, right? Your user is your perimeter today. So we have to start thinking about this when you plan for your budgets, for the year ahead. And I did mention about business email compromises, and that will continue to be one of the driving forces. And we always say, you are as strong as your weakest link. And human beings have always been that weakest link. So no guesses, no prizes for guessing that human errors continue to attribute to majority of your cyber breaches. When I look at business email compromises, most of them have a human element, right? Where it would be one individual who would have clicked one of the, I would say, suspicious mails or a malicious mail. And that's where a series of events starts, they start triggering on their own, right? So humans definitely have a role to play. So if somebody is worried about will ChatGPT replace us, my personal take on that is, it is at least some years ahead, right? I don't want to end up being arrogant and being saying something that to be proven wrong in just 5 years or 7 years. But I do believe it's an evolution. It's not happening in the near future. So we just set the background as to what are why is cyber important. We understand, right? What we spoke thus far is more in terms of helping you establish why, if you believe you are in a stage where you still have to prove why cybersecurity is important. We just spoke why it is important, right? I sincerely hope that the earlier slide is something that nobody has to ever use it. And everybody understands, the organization understands the importance. But if whatever reasons, if you have to explain and justify why cyber budgets are important, the earlier slide covers that well. Just moving on, I think what would be the factors determining your security spend? Because every time, budgets are not new. I always feel cyber security is a lot about common sense, because there are some things which are inherent as part of our DNA, right? Security has been an integral part of our evolution. Humans themselves, right? They have evolved, and they have evolved with their underlying I would say environment. They've evolved with their underlying threats. And if you really see, humans have figured out how to secure themselves from all ongoing threats that they see, that are pieces see. And there are some things that we learn inherently, right? There is no explanation that the science can provide. So why I'm saying this is something which is imbibed in everybody, right? So if you simply have to extend those understandings onto a larger context and apply that to your information assets. I'm careful about not talking this in terms of IT, right? I'm talking about information assets, wherever information resides. Information is about whatever is valuable, right? One thing we have to be very careful is information and valuable information are two very different and distinct things. And if you don't take care of that, there will be a lot of fatigue, because what I am seeing today is an overload of information. Again, let's go back to our own example of linking back to our lives, right? Our common, human lives. When at everybody's residence, right? Do you keep everything under a vault? The answer would be no, right? Obviously no. So let's say if you have your used papers, you have something, which is of not a value. Typically in a city like Mumbai, right, where space is a luxury, you would even have them stored outside of your house, because that, even if somebody has to take it away, it doesn't have a value for you, right? Then there are some valuables, you keep them as part of your cupboards, right? And whatever is your prime assets, right? It could be a jewelry, it could be something that's very valuable for you, right? Those are really stored in your safe vaults. And I think going forward in cyber world, we have to apply the same logic. Unfortunately, what has happened, and unfortunately, what I really see is we have gone all guns blazing. So today, right, we're using same level of rigor even to, let's say, safeguard a used paper that we may be using to safeguard your jewelry. And I do believe that is where a lot of budgets go really, they really go bad, right? Or you just believe, or you will see management coming and telling, guys, we're spending so much of money, where is the outcome, right? So I think this is one thing I definitely want you to really look at it whenever you are trying to build a budget. Try to distinguish what are your crown jewels. And I think that is, if you ask me what is a secret to make sure, because it's always a fight between the management and the cyber function. We need 100, and I know usually you should at least get 50. In most of our cases, we get 10, right? So then the challenge is, okay, this is 1/10 of what I really desire. How am I going to secure my organization assets? And that is itself, it's a trivia. We don't know how we're going to crack it. But this is one cheat sheet, if you tell me, on how you could really then focus on what is important. Because when you start identifying your crown jewels, you'd realize very soon that it's hardly only 10 to 15% of your org assets will actually result to be crown jewels. With that background, what should be the main categories? And I do believe this is not in terms of any order, but they're all important. I list compliance as the most important because today, every industry, we are seeing the regulators are becoming more and more concerned. They're getting more and more educated, and there are more and more regulations which are coming into play. As we talk about it, we know there is a data privacy bill that is to be introduced anytime, right? Likely in the monsoon or during the winter session. So we would see that then there will be a lot of compliance factors that you'll have to comply with. So if you're planning for your 2023-24 budgets, do not overlook compliances which would be required with upcoming regulations. Factor for it. I had the privilege of being part of some of the military deliberations, and the message was very clear for the corporates, at least on the BFSI segment. While we had deliberations at the BFSI level, please understand that the bill that is going to be introduced, it will apply to every body corporate. So regardless of the industry that you operate, it will be applicable to all of you. But the indications are clear that start working on data privacy, start working on identifying how are you securing your customer data, start working on identifying what are your sensitive data, start working on what are the type of data that you're collecting. So compliance definitely, because of what is going to happen and the, what all is going to come up in the coming few months, compliance should be top of your priority. Ongoing risk assessment, again, a very important requirement. I did cover that briefly. COVID was a rush. We just wanted things to be done at the speed of the light. Uh, it was a time when every security or every CISO didn't get the privilege of being able to do a good homework in terms of risk assessment, assessing the risk. So a lot of things were rushed. But I do believe it's now the time we go back, we reassess our cybersecurity posture, reassess where are the gaps, right? And start looking judiciously on what should you be investing to protect, your information assets. I do believe, and Ajay bhai, are you trying to say something?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So I wanted to, stop you here and ask you one very specific question because we are talking about the factors that determine the security spend. You
Yes.
know, when we are considering the issues like compliance, ongoing risk assessment, and business initiatives, what are the major, mistakes which you have seen in your timeline that, this happens where, you take a wrong decision of budgeting a cybersecurity spend? So what are the common mistakes, any CISO or a security team should really avoid while taking any kind of decisions or preparing the budgeting of the cybersecurity?
I think the largest one I do believe is hygiene, right? And I did mention that, all right? What is budget? Now, let's put it this way. The budget that I have to run my family, can I just impose on you? I know, and I can say, no, Ajay, this is my budget, and make sure that you exactly use the same budget. It doesn't work that way, right? Because the dynamics of every organization differ, right? So the largest issue that I see is when you start the budgeting exercise, right? You have to do a very thorough job going back into the past, determining what has worked, what has not worked. I do have a slide on that as well, Ajay, but just to put that in a context, right? It's more of are your current investments giving you the right ROI, right? Are we able to quantify the risk? Are we able to see what is going to be our future priorities? And the slide that we are on, is more of, it's more of a compass to tell you that this is a direction if you have to be factor all of this, right? And a culmination of all of them, right, should be ideally be your reasons how you plan your budget. Why things go wrong? Your question was more about the mistakes. So in what I said lies the answer on the mistakes we make, right? Mistakes we make is at times we superimpose the templates, right? And we say that, okay, fine. If an organization XYZ has gone on a certain journey, I would try and copy and I would just try and replicate that. And that doesn't really work, right? So that is very important. Other things why things fail is uh, we need to have a larger perspective, right? And a lot of times I have seen uh, CISOs or, our fraternity gets carried away with a certain tool, or they get really, we have a childlike enthusiasm. So if a technology is new, right? Let's say if AI ML is a buzzword, right? Zero trust is a buzzword, right? We simply embark on that journey, and when you embark on the journey without having a proper background or without a proper homework, I think that is a recipe for disaster. Because again, I'll go back to what I said. Everyone has a distinct journey. A zero trust is not a technology, it's a journey. It's how you're going to define a user journey. How are you going to define a user identity in your organization? If anybody believes that zero trust is a tool that you can simply superimpose, it cannot. And that's where, Ajay, a vicious cycle starts, because you invest on a tool, it doesn't give you any outcomes. Then you come into a realization that for a tool to give you outcome, you have to make 4 new investments. And that is where your complete budgets go for a toss, right? That's where your priorities go for a toss. You I've seen organizations do not even have a right scoping exercise, because when they feel, that's the time they go back into the drawing board and say, hey guys, do I need this technology for the entire spectrum? Right? That's where they have that eureka moment after having spent 8 months, and a lot of budgets which are already flown in, that they feel, my God, I have to really go back, really reset the clock and restart this. I think that's typical mistakes we have seen. So I do believe we are in an age where if you ask any CISO, right, their largest challenges are, it's a 80-20, it's a Pareto, kind of a concept. Only 20% of your investments are giving you 80% outcomes, which means 80% of your investments are today in areas and avenues, right, which are not giving you the desired outcomes. And I do believe that rush uh, is really something that we have to kind of take a step back, right? I'm sure every vendor is doing a phenomenal job selling their, the technology. They're not wrong. They see a vision, but I think marrying their vision with your organization ground realities is what is very important. So
And on
it's,
that point,
yeah.
Kalpesh, what I want to ask is that it's the system is driven by a lot of OEMs doing a phenomenal job to really pitch and helping organizations to build their cybersecurity structure. But as a CISO, as a security team, it's really very, very concerning when we look at that. They only have an option or balance between, do they work on the compliance or do they work on the actual security risk assessment is what is there, or do they really look at the business priority? So let's say if I have to really, it's not a two-side scale, it's a three-side scale. One side there is a business, one side there is a compliance, and another third side is where your security is, your risk assessment, your gaps are, shouting out loud from your, internal audit teams that, this is where the major gaps are, you need to really address it. So how do we really look at when, what should be the priority for a security team to focus on? Should that be a compliance? Should that be a business mandate? Or should that be something, they should really drive the agenda, what they have as a security gaps in place?
I think, Ajay, you asked me a question, right? Should anybody get married, right? And we know the answers, right? So a very similar question that you're asking me. Put it this way, right? Let's take the same principle forward, right? Everyone, again, I think I'm a huge, a believer that security is common sense, and keep on applying our life concepts back to your security, and life is simpler. Uh, I think I believe the art of any good leader is when you simplify, right? To make things complex, it's something that anybody can do it. So let me try and simplify this. Ajay, I do believe every one of us on the call, right, are professionals. So we manage our professional obligations. We also have a family. We manage those obligations. Most of us have our own personal passions, right? We have our own personal aspirations. We manage that. Can we ever say that, pick and choose one of them? The answer is no, because they're so interrelated, right? What I do professionally is going to fuel my family, is going to keep them happy. So what you do for compliance would eventually help you address your risk assessment, because the way compliance, the way regulations are driven, they are always looking into the future. Look back at what regulations try to achieve. They want to reduce breaches. They want to secure the environment. They want to give the end consumer a, a secure options where the data remains safe, right? So they are interlinked. So, can we ever say that, you can only work, and not care about your family? We know then that will create an issue, right? So it's a very fine balance that you'll have to achieve. So yes, look at the compliance, look at your internal stakeholders, right? Look at all those factors. And somewhere you have to really get the fine balance, right? Anything in it's like you have a table or you have a stool, right? So let's say one of your arms are very long, other is short, right? It's not going to work. Take the same analogy for a car. You cannot have a car, with four different wheels. They have to be in sync. So I think that's how, I look at it from that perspective.
Amazing, amazing analogy. I really, I mean, this is the right way to really look at. I mean, we cannot really leave out any of the requirements in place. All things has to be considered before we really go ahead to do any kind of a decision on a cybersecurity spend. And I think if we have tick the box of all three, I think the management discussions would be the best way to look at. What do you say?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. And that's what, if you see the slide, right? What would be important for the management is, yes, compliance, your risk assessment, your trainings. Again, Ajay, I am a very strong believer. While I'm addressing to Ajay, the larger community, right? So I think security today, let's look at it, right? Again, let's apply common life principles. Security today is like, defending your perimeter, right? So, we can take, pride that, yes, like our warriors, I'm not even saying that we are actually the warriors who are defending our country. What they do for the nation is way and above. We can only dream that, we may end up, being as contributing as them, but just for the sake of comparison, right? We'll have to look at it. But one thing which every soldier does, right, is they're battle ready. They do a lot of exercise, they always, equip themselves with the new strategies, they keep on doing exercise on a daily basis. So they ensure. Now, do they have to fight a war every day? The answer is no. But they keep themselves battle ready every day. So I think that's where trainings have to be very important. And I do believe, while we do a lot of it, Ajay, this is something that we neglect. And I do want to, I would request everybody that please put a lot of thrust on trainings, right? I do believe we are privileged, right? What we have in CXO, cyber threat, there are so many cyber board, there are so many organizations which are imparting awareness, education. We are lucky enough. But I do believe that building competency, building skills on your security is extremely important. Factor that. New business initiatives. So Ajay, again, to the point, where do things go wrong? So let's put it this way. Your complete focus of your security budgets is all about on-prem, right? And your business is moving on the cloud journey. Uh, we can always keep on saying that, the controls don't change, but we know the reality that there is a lot that differs in a cloud security versus your on-prem security. Now, if you are not aligned with your business objectives or their initiatives, say, for example, if they have a digital push on cloud and you haven't factored that you need to then have cloud security as an integral part of your budgets, that's a disaster. Because then what would really happen is you'll have to cut a lot of corners to accommodate your cloud security, right? And trust me, if anybody believes that when you go for cloud security is free, right? It's a Alice in Wonderland moment, right? So, and the reality is going to hurt you very, very bad, right? There are no free lunches in this world. Everything is for a price, right? So, why I'm saying this is, Ajay, is a lot of organizations are going to spend a lot of money on cloud security in the next 24 months. And business parity shifts. Organizations today are trying to move from the traditional models to the next model. Simply put it this way, the Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, right? Context-based, right? Hyper-personalization. You're going to see all of this. These are not the buzzwords. Very soon, you will see that these are going to be things which are going to come up in your boardrooms. And I would urge all the practitioners, in the cyber industry to acquaint themselves, right? It's not about the world about hyper personalization. It's about what goes behind that. Behind that means you are going to use so much of context based, interaction with your customers. That means you're going to collect a whole ton of data, right? That means that your priority for securing your information assets are going to grow multiple times, right? So those are the things you'll have to really look at it. And the last bit on this is try and balance your investments between prevention, detection, and response. Now, many of you may feel like this is no rocket science. What is it about it? I'll tell you statistics, right? I don't know. I know it's a muted conversation. Ajay, let me ask you, any guesses? What will it be 33, 33, 33, or what is your guess? How would people be spending money on this?
I mean, if you ask me, it's there has always been more focus on prevention and then detection. Response has really got very less budgets over a period of time. But this is what my take is. But I think participants, if you can, mention what exactly you think. Do you think that what would be the more focus on?
Yeah, I think while we wait to hear from our community, Ajay, you're absolutely bang on target. It isn't equitable, right? Yes, prevention is what our focus would be. We invest on detection as well. But the sad thing is response is overlooked completely, right? And that is where, a lot really fails, right? We have to invest in our response mechanisms, right? Tools that will help you processes, incident response, right? Or DFIR, right? Your digital forensics, and incident response have to be an area, right? That you choose as an area where either you build a competency, you have those, engagements in place, right? If you don't do that, right, it's a ticking time bomb. I did say that we don't live in an era where we are sitting on laurels of whether we'll be compromised. Rather, we are sitting in an era where it's just a matter of time when we'll be compromised, right? So I do believe and every time an incident strikes, what is going to differentiate you from the rest would be your response mechanism, right? So my urge again is when you plan for your 2023 or your future budgets, please consider this, right? Forensics ability, Are you having the right skills to do the forensics? Are you collecting the right logs? Do you have the right data? So even Certain, by the way, has made this very important. Response is what has also been propelled by Certain. And I don't know how many of you will be aware, but Certain introduces an element of criminal law. Now, what does criminal law and civil law differ with? Criminal law means you could have a jail term, right? Fortunately, there hasn't been examples where they have acted on that, but it just says that response mechanisms, if it's been overlooked for long, will have serious consequences. You have a criminal law today against which you could be tried. We've seen in US, Ajay, where the CISOs were they were prosecuted for gross
That's right.
negligence.
That's
right. You have a law like you have a similar law in India. So even after this, you choose to ignore response. You're doing that at your own risk, right? And you have to be very careful about it. 180 days of logs to be retained on a rolling basis, a 6-hour window to respond and report incidents. Those are things, if you don't have a strong response mechanism, you would never meet those timelines. Ajay, I think you're trying to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. So what, you rightly mentioned that, there has to be an equivalent amount of focus on prevention, detection, and response. And while we talk about creating the perspective of compliance and business initiatives and all, I want to go a bit deeper out here, because when we talk about security, cybersecurity spends and all, the most of the consulting and the OEM focus comes on the perspective that you are going to invest in a new technology or a new campaign or a new program for cybersecurity for the organization. Now, what is really important for a security team also is that they have certain controls which is already implemented. Either they are doing it manually or they have already implemented through their past investments. Now, the idea out here is that we also need to take a decision out here. And what I want you to understand from you is that while we are going ahead and definitely going to invest in the newer ones and we are going to get the newer budgets on it, right? What are the things which you need to consider from the existing investments, right? That will really help us to build a better budget, right? So for example, if I have implemented a multi-factor authentication solution and an EDR, right? And these are ongoing, and I need to maintain that as well. Plus, I need to invest more in the new technologies which are coming in depending on the new threats. Now, what is the thought process? How do I really look at that, the existing investment, what it needs to be done with that, and vis-a-vis to the newer ones?
Sure. I thought I had a slide on that, but no, I have not included that. So nevertheless, I'll talk about this. So I think, Ajay, yeah, that's always a dilemma, right? In terms of your current investments and how we're going to move into the future, new technologies, there is going to be a new phase of consolidation, right? Because what has happened is, and it's a very sad thing which has happened in the industry. I think we were always sold. There was a timeline where it was governed purely by the OEMs. So let's put it this way: a time came when OEMs sold you that the SIM is the totality, and you don't need anything else if you have the right SIM solutions, right? It wasn't factored well, it wasn't researched well. Ask anybody today. SIM has simply become a log storing box, right? You store your logs, that's about it. Correlation happens, but the kind of alerts which are generating on SIM is a fatigue, right? So how do you harmonize it, right? So I do believe, right, a lot of this will really work on a risk-based approach, right? Ajay, you have to really go back to the basics, understand what you're protecting, right? And then figure out how we're going to spend your money on, right? It has to be a very fine balance in terms of the domains of security, right? I would look at perimeter as one of the domain. I would look endpoint as one of the domains. I would look cloud as one of the domains, right? So on and so forth. And then you have to really make sure that whatever investments you are making, they're harmonized, right? Because today,
No, but at this point, let me stop you out here. And this is what I want to understand is, that when I said that when we have a specific specific controls already in place, what will really define us that, the existing controls which are in place are working perfectly? How do we benchmark ourselves to justify that whatever? Because see, while we are communicating a budget with the management teams, it is also equally important for us that, we really give them the ROI or ROSI of the existing investments as well. So what are the metrics we should be really focusing on?
So I think here is, where I've said quantify the risk, right? So what really happens over here is and calculate ROI. What I do personally is every investment that we make in any of the tools, I kind of make it mandatory. So I work with the OEMs at the start of the year. We define what is that we're going to measure at the end of the year in terms of tangible benefits for my company, right? That is something that is a top of my agenda. We should not get carried away with a lot of jargons, right? It's not about the promises that the tool can do. It's about what the tool will actually do. Document that as part of your KRI. Because when I said calculate risk or quantify risk, right? Calculate ROI and quantify risk, it just means English. If you don't kind of, back it up with actions, right? So what are the actions? As I said, define your KRIs now. So if you are saying, Ajay, that let's say that you have invested in technology, I'll just give an endpoint, right? You're currently invested in endpoints. Now we know endpoints, market is evolving very rapidly. I'll give you a simple example, which every organization is undergoing right now. So you had the traditional AV, right? Which are all signature based. So everybody would have their AV. Now we realize that AVs are not enough because the attacks are getting more and more complicated. So somewhere down the line, you started investing in the EDRs. There are organizations that have AV plus EDR. I think, in fact, I was a little shocked in one of the recent Gartner events where they asked, how many of you have only one endpoint solution? Not many hands went up. So, my presumption was people are sleeping. Then he asked, how many of you have two, endpoint solutions deployed in your organization? Many hands went up. And I just thought, that is it. It cannot go beyond that. To my shock, then he said, how many of you have three? There were many hands which were still up, right? And then finally, I know he could have gone on and on, but he said, don't be surprised if there are people in the room who even have 4 endpoint, detection or, solutions deployed in their organization. And Gartner isn't surprised because they have seen that organizations have gone berserk, right? Trying to have so many of endpoint protections deployed. This is what Rajesh, Ajay, it explains, the current dilemma of the industry. What is happening is you have invested, right? Then you try to invest something over and above. So we are hesitant about trying to reset the clock. So we want to keep on building on. And then it reaches a stage where it becomes overly complicated, overly complex. It is draining your resources, right? And it's not achieving your outcomes. So that is where I do believe calculate your ROI. So if every organization has to go back and then have a metric to say, okay, fine, I've invested in an AV solution. How many attacks have they really blocked in the year? What is their contribution in the overall journey, right? And if that answer, will give you a lot of insights on what you have to do in future, it will also let you know,
That's
there is
wonderful metrics, Kalpesh, when you said that, when we talk about EDR or specific controls, which showcases about that how many, attacks we have, stopped or we have mitigated or we have remediated. Now, my concern out here is that there are, on a larger organizations, we talk about the conglomerates and large organizations. There are tons of attacks which are happening on a daily basis. Some are mitigated, many are mitigated through the automated tools which are implemented, and many are, you need to have your separate team in place, right? My concern over there is that, have you ever seen that these numbers are really fudged or there are a lot of false positives around it? And if yes, how, a CISO team can really identify at the end of the year while they are doing the budgeting and look at these metrics and say that, okay, this seems to be a false positive, or this, out of 1,000 attacks which you have mitigated, almost 40% were like false positives, right? So probably your control is not working perfectly, right? And I'm not just saying this for the EDR perspective, but any of the control. It can be even a SOC team, it can be a vulnerability management program as well, can be anything. So, yeah.
I think, Ajay, the answer to this is simple. Go back to the PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, and act, right? So if I have to really go back and see whether my controls are giving me the desired outcomes, right, I will have to really go into the check state of it. Now, what do I check, right? I will really check. Yes, there'll be a lot of data, right? On an average, right, you'd be generating GBs of data every day. And large organizations generate TBs of data every day. So, it's like finding a needle, in a room full of haystack. That's going to be a challenge. So what you would really go back and do is you'd start identifying material impact, right? Again, go back to what I started with. And I think that's the fatigue is definitely, a dimension in our industry, which is kind of limiting us. It is slowing us down big time, right? So we are not able to remove the noise. Right now, that is where I think we need to have that focus. So you need to filter, narrow down what is important for your organization. Look at your crown jewels, right? And the entire focus would then be on the crown jewels. Look at, are we having adequate protection on that? Identify if they are being a target, right? And then if you start looking back, it will give you good insights. Now, to validate whether the controls are giving you desired outcomes, there are various. You have security benchmarks, which is a very independent assessment, right? Where, they have passive scanners and your internet assets are scanned independently by them, and they will come back to you saying that, this is how they see whether you are good, so they have a rating. So they will rate you accordingly. So that can be one of the benchmarks, right? Need not be the only benchmark, right? You could have your own, your red teaming exercises, purple team exercises, a series of that. So when you do your own exercises, it's more about thinking like an adversary, right? So I know I'm deviating from the topic of budget, but they are important. Why? Because what you do, right, is also, while this looks to be a standalone strategy for driving cyber programs, but I do believe the missing link is the red teaming exercises, the benchmarking exercises that every organization does. We don't tie it back to our budgets. Ideally, that should be the input, right? So if there are those gaps,
having those benchmarks is good, but tying that to the budget is equally important.
exactly, because otherwise, we are losing the chain, right? No, so what is important now? If you really ask me, why do we struggle in the boardroom, right? We struggle because the boardroom looks at the larger picture, right? And it's like an elephant in the room, right? So when they see the entire elephant as an animal, and when they ask any cyber professional, can you explain me what the elephant is all about, right? And we get so gung-ho about one specific part. So let's see if we may end up, and I'm sure I have seen a lot of CISOs coming out of the boardroom, and they kind of admit in person, boss, I think I just spoke about one. I had so many ideas, but I just ended up talking about XYZ. Now that XYZ would be, one of the recent OEMs who trying very hard to sell that technology to you, and your mind was all occupied about it, and you just presented that view, and your board never they never kind of they never swam with you, or they were never in sync with you. So those are the challenges, right? So this is where it matters a lot, right? So when you do your threat assessment,
I'm loving this conversation, Kalpesh, when you say that, the real dilemma between the boardroom and the security team or a CISO is that, security team or CISO is specifically focused on a only pain point, which it thinks is the whole world. And, and the management team or a board is looking at from a perspective of a very different dimension. Right. And now this is really something, input, which I would like to get it from you, that how a CISO should really look at that, right? Because when we want to really focus on something which we know as a security person, that this is a real burning problem. There are certain breaches which has happened because of this particular issue, right? But board has its own priorities when they plan a security budget, when they want to invest in a security budget, right? They want to really focus on, okay, this can be a potential merger which is coming into picture, and I really want to focus on that, or this is a particular potential business I'm looking at the next financial year. I'm going to focus that, make sure that my security really gets aligned to that. Now, this is a really huge, gap which you're looking at, right? I'm sure, management does communicate to the CISO teams that, this is what our plans are, but still, this is the gap which is there. And how does a CISO really get out of that mindset and start focusing on from a business mindset perspective? It's something which I want to, I
Sure.
want guidance on your side.
I think, Ajay, I have learned a very great concept, from my leader, right? Is Mr. Rangarajan, a veteran in the industry. And, when I was interacting with him, right, he gave a very interesting dimension in terms of how board he's been, he's been a senior board member himself. So lucky enough and fortunate that, I got an insight, from him in terms of how the board thinks. So, the question is very simple, right? What is a function of a brake in any vehicle, right? Let me ask you, Ajay, why do you think we have brakes in the vehicle?
I understand that. Yeah, and I can, go ahead and answer that, but I would leave this to the audience to really answer this, because I know exactly where you're coming from, Kalpesh bhai. And guys, this question is to you. What do you really think? What is the importance of brake in a vehicle? When it can be anything, it can be a scooter, it can be a cycle, it can be a Ferrari, it can be SUV. What do you really think?
I'm not able to see any of, because I'm sharing my screen, so you'll have to keep me updated.
I'll keep on
whatever you
reading
say.
it to you. I'll keep on reading it to you. Amitabh says it's to drive fast, safely. Sridhar says that the importance of brake is to reduce risk. Promesh mentions about that you can keep a check on your speed, right? And we have one more, that you can do your business at a speed. That's by Gunjana Modi, right? Controlling your vehicle, while enjoying the speed.
Okay.
Yogesh Darke, Dr. Yogesh Darke says comfortable seat with safety harnesses.
Okay.
Right. Really interesting answers.
I swear.
Kalpesh,
I think all of them are right? But yes, I think if you really ask me, I think Amitabh, Gunjana, right? And many more. And I'm sure, I'm sorry, I don't have the screen in front of me, but the name that I could capture is Amitabh and Gunjana. They're right. Brakes are not to really stop the vehicle, but it's because of the brake that, you can even dream of going at a higher speed, right? And that is how you have to look at cyber, right? Cybersecurity is not a hurdle. It's not going to slow down the business. It is there to enable the business. And Ajay, I feel that's a shift in the way we've always thought about cyber, right? Cyber, and see, when I say about risk, right, quantify risk, right, they are not mere terms. They are not theory, right? Because if you keep them as theory, you'll never succeed. At every instance, risk quantification is all about the benefit versus the risk, right? And you have to take a very judicious call. So you have to remember that the job of security, if you believe that we are the brakes in a vehicle, is not to stop the vehicle, right? But it's rather to let the vehicle go at, let's say, 200 kilometers per hour. It should be the confidence that we give to the business that with what I offer, right? So in case you are going at high speeds, I'll offer you a mechanism to slow down and to come to a halt, right? And that is what security should all be about, right? So if from that analogy, and that with what, sorry, I just started hearing my own echo, but I think that's resolved now. So glad about that. So I think we have to apply the same thing over here. Boardroom, right, is a place where, people have that, it's like a 70,000 feet above, right? I always believe if you go to a building, right, and if you are on the top floor of a building, the view that you have is very different, right? And that's where, the elephant analogy comes into place. What you see from the top of the building is it's a surrounding, right? It's your environment, right? Come back to your floor, right? The view will be limited. come back to your, let's say your ground floor, right, or your parking, the view is very different, right? So what is important over here is, like, none of us are wrong, but we have to understand that the board will always be interested in knowing how are we going to move forward in the environment that we are in, right? So focus again, every time you are going to the board, what are they interested? Ajay, the largest risk today board sees is a compliance risk, right? I did mention that today some of the deviations have a criminal, the criminal law applies, right? Board is aware, board is aware of it. So we need to then focus into what are we doing to mitigate that for our organization, right? Your ongoing risk assessments, we spoke about it, quantify, right? Have measurable KRS, have the benchmarks, right? And be able to present that, right? Most important for the board is we have to spend time. Now, I think the unfortunate thing I have seen with your cyber budgeting is we just feel that's an exercise for us as a function. Like, it's like I will do as it pleases me, right? That's not how security, or that's not how any function in the organization can grow and excel, right? We have to go back, we have to talk to the business functions, we have to go and talk to the strategy function. We have to spend the time to understand what is the way forward for the business. And if we do that, right, every statement that you're going to give in that board, or every item of your budget will be going back and saying that we have a vision of doing XYZ, and this is what I'm planning to do as cyber to enable it, or to again let you go at full speed, right, full throttle. You can go ahead because this is what I am going to be doing. That is where the risk assessment gets into play, right? You would revisit your existing control stack. You will see how many of that can be reused, right? And then you would revisit and say, okay, fine, I believe this is not adequate. Ajay, bhai, you again, common sense, right? When you buy a new jewelry, you always don't buy a new security vault. If your current vault is good enough, you leverage on that, right?
Exactly.
But the fact is, let's say you're buying jewelry and now you bought a big painting, right? Then you need to have something different, right? So I think you will have to, I always keep on saying, I don't know. I'm always astonished, right? Because I believe, I told at the start of the session, security is inherent, it's part of our DNA, right? Then why is cybersecurity so complex? So I always keep on asking myself, either I am absolute nerd who knows nothing about cyber, or I live in an era, right, where things are so complicated that simplifying is mastery, right? And simplifying is an art that we all have to learn. I don't know where I am, but it's a dilemma that I'm trying to figure out myself, but simplified, right? So that is where, again, when new business
Talking about the
initiatives.
simplification, that's what my next question was on about. That okay, I'll come with the keep posting the questions, guys. We'll come to that questions. But this is question something which is on what the simplification is, that when we talk about cybersecurity and we talk about the perspective that management looks at the overall elephant, or they look at from the 30,000 feet. Another major challenge when we communicate with the board is that most of the board is completely non-technical. They only understand numbers. They only understand that, can I have a sound sleep or not? That's it. That's a single line which they are wanting to listen from the security team. Can I have a sound sleep? That's it. They are not interested कि भाई endpoint में ये problem हो रहा है. They are not interested to understand. मेरे SIM में मैंने 15 TB का logs इकट्ठा कर लिया है. I can do a lot of forensics and all. They are not interested to understand any of this. They just want to understand, can my business run 24/7 for next 365 days? Now that is what the answer is looking at. And I'm sure there is a lot of homework which goes behind this. What is your take on that?
I think, Ajay, I look at it two ways, right? The board today is far more educated, right? And I do feel, right, there are two ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it is, do they talk my language, right? And it's not necessary, because I go back to the brake analogy. We are here to enable the business to go full throttle, right? So I do believe, as security professionals, we are the ones, right, who are giving a lot of, who are throwing a lot of jargons at them, right? What we should do is simplify it for them, right? What is our job? As an enabler, tell the board, how are we contributing to the growth story, right? It's all about telling them that this technology initiatives you are embarking on it. This is how I am integrating myself with the overall culture or the ecosystem of the organization. This is how we are working to make sure that the technology arm and the cyber arm, right, are closely knit, and we are building and harmonizing, on how we are achieving the common goals, right? I would, I'm kind of, predicting for the future, but the future CEOs will all come from the tech, background, because what we are seeing today is every organization is on a tech journey, right? So what was fundamentally, our organization, let's take, for example, Domino's, right? By the way, I have no shares of Domino's. I'm just giving an example, neither are there customers or anything of that sort. So if people think why Domino's, just an example, or even Amazon, right? What has really defined them, right? Amazon brought into concept a marketplace, right? It redefined the way it is driven. It is no more, it's no more a place where you're selling, goods. It's a tech platform, right? It's a user experience. Domino's is not about pizza. Everybody can make a pizza, and I'm sure many can make better pizza than Domino's. It was a tech that has driven them, into the scale, that they have grown at, right? So we are seeing more and more businesses today, and the great thing is, there was a time where we spoke about traditional versus the new age organizations. Today there is that blur is, it's that gap has been completely been blurred. Traditional organizations are also speeding up, and we're seeing immense and more investments made for that, so that organizations are agile and all of them, right? So again, long story, or short, Ajay, I do believe board understands, what they need. I do believe, see, a CFO could have always said, I'm the number guy, I will do what I have to do. But CFO somewhere down the line, they completely merge themselves with what the board expects. Board is nothing but a voice of your stakeholders, a voice of your interested parties, right? And as CISOs, we have to make sense with them, right? We have to swim along with them. We cannot. And I do believe that's a major hurdle that, or a major limitation that we see in the industry. CISOs believe we are carved out differently. Hence, we will continue to use our language, our jargons, and it's up to the board to come up to the level. Well, I do believe it's for them, it's not coming up. They have to come many levels down. I think so journey would be somewhere we have to climb up, somewhere they will come down, right? I think that's where will make sense. Otherwise, it will continue to be what I said, we go into the rooms, we keep on throwing jargons after jargons after jargons after jargons. The board will be as confused. It's like, Rajay, I start talking to you about, a surgery, and I say, let's say I'm not a doctor, but somebody who's a doctor can resonate. If they start talking absolute technical, that, I'm going to have this, and I'm going to work on this muscle, I'm going to have this artery, I'm going to have this vein moved, this vein will be cut, but don't worry about it. Think about this as a patient. What will be your condition? If somebody had to explain you what is open heart surgery in absolute technical terms for you as a patient, you would be dead even before the surgery. Because अगर बोलेगा कि आपका हार्ट को निकाल के साइड में रख देंगे, don't worry, 2 घंटा अपने आप काम कर देगा, you'd be like, are you out of your senses?
Interesting. Yeah, that's
right.
true.
So that is what I think, and that's the reason doctor doesn't come and tell you all of that. He says, don't worry, right? I have done XYZ in my life, right? This is a very simple, and this is how every doctor says. It's a very simple procedure. I have done it. He talks about what is, he gives you confidence about basically the advancement in the surgery. Basically, a number which says X many number of surgeries are performed by me. They're all been good. He talks about the mortality, but he'll say the percentages are less, right? I do believe that's a story. That's a dialogue we need to have in the boardroom, right? That this is what it is. I do believe after all of this, we may fail, but the percentage is going to be negligible, right? This is how it's going to work for us. This is work for the industry. Benchmarking is a classic way to benchmark yourself vis-a-vis the industry. right? This is what the industry, this is what our peers are doing. And this is a catch-up game for us, right? Even if you are the top leader, right? How are we going to invent and reinvent ourselves, right? That is what your new business initiatives would be talking about. So how do you remain on top of your game? It is not, I do always believe reaching on top is very easy. Staying there is very difficult, right? So staying there is more about how you are able to nicely knit yourself and uh, embed cybersecurity as part of the organization dynamics. Otherwise, it's going to fail.
Interesting. Right. So we have a couple of questions which are coming in, and we have 30 minutes more. What I'll do is I'll start picking up the questions and asking you that,
Maybe
because
Ajay, before I do that, I will just cover some slides in a in a 30-second manner.
let's do that. Yeah.
And so that then I can stop sharing screen, and that will give me an opportunity to read the questions live. Nothing else.
Perfect. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Perfect. So I'll not take much of time here. Again, this is tips. I've covered it. So I'll just move to the next slide. Give me a second. Yeah. Again, effective budget, quantify risk, reactive versus proactive approach. Again, as I said, reactive is what you said, Ajay, is where you tend to fail, right? Reactive is more in terms of industry may, let's say there's a breach, right? So, and somebody says, I've gone for XDR, you blindly go for XDR. You don't do your homework, you don't have a criteria, you don't define success criteria for a tool or a technology to be deployed in your organization, right? You don't define your KRAs. A sure shot failure, right? I can tell you when organizations fail to do their homework, that tools will not give them desired outcomes, right? One last thing is plan for contingency. No matter, and I've seen every CISO beg, right? There are two things, right? When things go wrong, right, you'll have unlimited budgets, right? But there, when it hits the extreme, but there are a lot of things that happen in between, right? When things are not really that bad, but you're seeing that there are some challenges which are coming, and every CISO struggles, to say that let's say you feel there's a beacon in your environment, right? Now, beacon is not something that is a classified incident, right? It's just a suspicion, but then you have to do an elaborate IR or a DFIR, or your forensics also have to be done. So now I've seen people struggle that they don't have budgets for that. In any which ways, we all know cyber is always a leftover of IT budgets. So how do you go about it? So just make sure that you plan some contingency, because as a CISO, changing regulations, some incidents which will come up, you'll always be asked to spend some money, and that contingency fund should be something that doesn't have to go to elaborate processes in your organization where it goes to the finance, then it goes to the procurement. A CISO should at least have a small kitty where he or she can take a decision, in an ad hoc manner, and it is their discretion to call this up, right? I'm not talking about accountability, 100% accountability for the CISO, but the power to make that decision for an amount that is agreeable in your organization. And the last thing over here is the general benchmark. The industry says it's about 10% of your overall spend, right? So, and I think I have one more slide. Yeah, that is my last slide. Something for 2023, right? I'm not going to talk about it, but yes, I'll just leave it here for a couple of, let's say for 20 seconds, and I'll stop sharing my screen. But yes, one thing over here is cyber insurance is an essential part. Do not overlook it. The clauses on cyber insurance are also very essential. Do not, I would put it, third-party risks are integral part of your cyber insurance. Do not assume that it all comes by default. Have the discussion with your insurance organization to see whether your third risk coming from your third parties are covered as part of your risk cover. If not, make sure that all your third parties cover you for the risk that might come for the services that they deliver to you. All right.
So while people, going through the tips, I want to ask on one of your previous slides, you said that plan for the contingency, budget for the contingency. If you can just give a 2-minute quick review of what exactly is like, because we are already investing so much in cybersecurity, right? What is the contingency, what you're looking at, and how do you really want to approach that?
I think contingency, as I said, Ajay, that's an unforeseen situation, right? Because there are two things in a cyber world, known and unknown, right? See, what is known would anyways be factored in a budget. But what happens if there is an unknown that comes into, into your understanding, or, that's discovered during the year, right? So for that, you need to have some kind of a fund to maneuver yourself, right? Now, a lot of times unknowns can be addressed through your current security stack in terms of the controls that you have. But there are times when the unknowns will require either investigations.
But I understand this, but doesn't a cyber insurance really take care of it? Do we
No.
really, even after taking a cyber insurance, do we still have to plan for the contingency fund?
Contingency is not about, it's not transferring the risk, right? Cyber insurance is all about transferring, a risk when it arises, right? Contingency is all about unknown, right? Where you have to come to a conclusion on the if you have to quantify what is the damage, you'll have to carry or take more steps. Let's say, put it this way, it would be one of the necessary steps for you to have a proper claim process. Because when you go for an insurance, right, you'll have to do a thorough investigation. So let's say if you are planning to go the process of claiming a cyber insurance, or using that option, you'll have to have a chain of evidence. And for that, you'll have to then have the funds who, you'll have to engage with the IR, who would make sure that, all legally admissible. See, when I talk about cyber insurance, it's not that you're going to go and fight in the court, but for cyber insurance claim process, you would have to have a complete chain of command, right? You'll have to have a chain of evidence, right? Which is well documented, so that IR, you'll have to spend that investments. So that is unforeseen, right? Let's say there is a complete new threat vector which arises, in the year, right? And which you have to make an investment. For example, contingency could be as simple, right, that a new business initiative has come out with an absolute new model, and it's come out with a new technology that they're going to use, for which there are no controls, which, control tech that you have. So it may be very basic control, but you have to invest on them. So it could be as complicated or as bad as, IR, or it could be as simple, as a business initiative where you haven't really invested and you'll have to make the investments. Somebody on cloud, right, just starts a cloud journey. They may not be able to go full blown on cloud security from year one, because if it's mid-year, but you might just want to still negotiate with your your cloud service CSP, cloud service provider, and see what is the basic level of controls you can achieve. So that contingency fund can help. Otherwise, the process will be too long drawn, and you'll not. It's more of, that comfort. It's like your piggy bank, right? You just want to have that amount with you, right? Where if need be, at your discretion, you can use it. Because what really happens is there are times when your time to react is a very short window. And if you have to go through your organization processes, right, it will take months. And Ajay, you know it better, that vendor onboarding itself may take, ages across. Contingency is when you have to act swiftly, right? You should have that powers, right? It could be part of your own budgets, but you can just say that of the budgets for X amount, we are giving that discretionary power to the CISO to make that decisions and go ahead with whatever they believe are necessary to safeguard the organization.
Right.
A very long answer to a very short question.
But I have a lot of questions coming in, and I think we can stop the screen share.
Yeah, I'll do that. So I can. Yeah, I can also then participate a little more, being able to read them. I'm going to stop sharing the screen then. Thank you so much, all.
Perfect. So now a quick question now. This comes from Fani Tuluri, and in your opinion, what is the best way of doing risk assessment among threat modeling based or vulnerability assessment based?
It's a chicken and egg, right? Again, I think depending on what is your competency, choose one that suits your organization, right? Both of them work exactly the same way. There are pros and cons to both of them, right? Vulnerability will always come. If you go the vulnerability way, people will always come and tell you, what about the unknowns, right? If you go the threat way, people will come and tell you that not every threat is a risk, right? So it's a fine balance. Exactly. But if you want to be a little more sharp, and if you believe budgets and all of them are constrained, vulnerability could be, a suggested approach. Why? Because that kind of gives you, the focus is wherever you are exposed, and address them.
So do you think that, this approach, risk assessment approach, should be focused from a perspective, what board understands the best? Do they understand the threat language or do they understand the vulnerability language?
Absolutely, yes. That's what I know, Ajay. It's very important. All of our exercises today are only meant for consumption, between our community. I think the next leap of faith for our communities, how do we convert that into something, a language that the board understands, right? And let me be very honest over here. It's wrong to assume that the board doesn't understand, right? Because what I've seen is every board spends more hours learning than all of us put together, right? So I've seen the CEOs putting a lot of time to understand the new technology. They want to have a grasp and hand over what is going on, right? So it's not that you're going to talk Greek and Latin to them. If you start the journey, you will see that brilliant ideas come from them, right? So
Perfect.
I would see that way.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for that answer. The next question comes from Mukund. He's asking, the cybersecurity budget normally includes your short-term goals and your long-term needs, right? And you need funds for incident response as well as recovery. So how to consider these points to really focus and put it in the budget?
Okay. I think very simple, Mukul. What you have today, you have to manage it. So that will be a priority one, right? B is then you have to look at consolidation of the current investments. So that is where you have to then go into automation, right? You'd have to redefine your scope, right? And see how could you start saving money out of it, right? And I obviously believe the first time implementation of any tool will come at a certain cost. While the tool licenses cost may increase, but the cost for managing the tool would eventually reduce. The operations cost can be reduced because that's completely in control of us as an organization or as CISOs, right? Or as a fraternity, right? Automating it is definitely a way forward. So try and look about automation, right? Try and see how we can reduce the touch points for the current investments. That will create a small kitty of money that you can use for something better, right? IR, as I said, you have to factor in. IR would always be something that you may not use, right? So maybe after a certain, and it's a risk, yeah. Let's say in the last quarter, if I decide I didn't have an incident all 9 months, and last quarter I have budget which is unutilized, and maybe I want to club it with whatever savings I have achieved over a year, and I want to go for a certain initiative, we can do that. And for the new initiatives, the best thing to do, Mukul, is whenever you tie it up with the new business initiatives, right, or the new journey that your organization is embarking, the chances for you to get larger budgets are way more better when you club yourself, with the newer initiatives than trying to show new initiatives as part of your budgets, right? Because when you go into budgets, as I said, there will be so many lines of priority. We have to understand the first priority, it will always be for something that gets more revenue for the organization, because that's the fundamental for any for-profit organization, right? So we have to then put ourselves and park ourselves in a manner where we are part of the initiatives where the revenues are going to propel, and we show that, okay, this is how we're going to be part of the journey.
Fantastic. So any initiative which really helps a business to earn more money or enables them to earn more money is something which is going to take the first priority in security. And that has to be figured out by each organization. The next question comes from Mohit Kumar. He asks, how to answer this if CFO asks, what areas of business are most vulnerable and which have the greatest potential to use security as a business improvement and differentiator? It may be helpful to decide the budget as per the risk priority. I think this is in the similar lines on what you just said, but do you want to add more to this?
I think, yeah, we've covered it. I think if a CFO asks us, what is the most critical business function, I do believe we have to take a step back and see where is our most sensitive data. So identify crown jewels, right? And Mohit, if you identify your crown jewels, right, this would be basically an elevator pitch for you. So every time you meet any of your, senior leaders, know what are the crown jewels and know what are you doing to protect that. And I do believe that is going to take care of all those requirements.
Perfect. The next comes from Gunjan Modi. the question out here is, if the management, you ask for a budget and they say that they are out of the ask budget and they only approve 30% of your ask. This is something which is been asked by almost everybody in the industry. So I think this is a very good question to take ahead. Yeah, please.
Okay. So, Gunjan, what I really do is, when I create a budget, right? Again, there are, see, risk has various dimensions, right? You cannot eliminate the risk ever. You mitigate the risk, you transfer the risk, or you accept the risk, right? So when I budget, what we do is we define what are the must-have implementations which would have consequences. So and this is what we have to build a lot of context, right, to what we're asking, right? So for every line item, we add, basically a dimension on what is it going to help us achieve. So we say that, okay, this is a ask, helps me meet my regulatory compliance, right? Are there any more parameters, right? So then I will say that it's also a business enabler for me, right? And then we, identify. So what really happens is the discussions when we have to really say that it's going to be 30% or 40%. See, end of the day, the board or, the CEO is an executive. He's a captain of the ship, right? He or she are going to take calls. They may be risky calls. They may be, prudent calls. They may not be so prudent calls, but the risk acceptance has to be very clear. I think we will have a limitation there. So we'll have to then, our documentation has to be foolproof. So I have seen a lot of times when those, and I'm in part of the discussions, honestly. So when we say that, okay, fine, what are we going to do? And if you say 30%, this is going to be regulatory non-compliance, that's going to come flat on us, right? Then I've always seen your organization or your management will cut the corners and give you those budgets, right? So at least you know that let me put it this way, Gunjan, let's say if there is, there's a time when, my salaries have topped and I have 100 rupees and I have to choose what am I going to spend on. Obviously, I'm going to spend on feeding myself and my family, right? So that is a way, if I have no other choice, the only compliance when you've been put to, cut to size is compliance. Because without compliance, right, you'll be out of business, right? And that's something we'll have to really put on it. Then you pick up the second bucket, then the third bucket, and so on and so forth. And you prioritize. And first priority should be compliance. Second, third, fourth will change for every organization, depending on their culture.
Okay. The next question comes from KK Krishna Kumar Jhala. Some cybersecurity solutions are long-term, which requires 3 to 5 years of implementation rather than a short-term. Budget planning is done every year with a percentage variation based on business profits and plans. What is the best approach to take such long-term spending and convince the C-level?
I think usually what we do is, if there are long-term plans, right? Again, break it down into measurable outcomes. Most of these projects are not something, which is going to turn around overnight, right? There are various steps on how you build those programs. So if you break them down into various milestones, right? And then have a touch point to reassess the journey, right? And revalidate whether we are meeting our outcomes or do we have to change our plans. I think that would be an ideal approach. So it would initially start with the feasibility, right? And I think in feasibility, we can either do it internally amongst ourselves or reach out to external partners who can help you find a footprint of a new initiative. And this is what we also do. We plan for, let's say, 8 years down the line, right? Now that 8 years plan is going to ask us for a lot of budgets. But what we really do over here is we really break it down into very small pieces, right? To the level that we believe we can measure it, right? They are a part of the journey. And we keep on assessing them, that for me to reach my end destination, am I making the right progress? If I'm not making the right progress, again, it gives us an opportunity to revisit and, retune and, like completely, remodel our strategy on this, right? So that will be the way forward. Coming on to profitability part of it, I have a different view there, because what has happened today is your spends on IT, regardless of profitability, and as I did say that, today businesses have to survive. Cost of compliance, cost of tech is something, whether you make loss, whether you make profit, you'll have to incur the cost, because that is how your businesses are driven today. I think we have come of that age. Let's put it this way, that today, if let's say your IT is shut down, the very simple question is, would your business survive? And I think the majority of, I think 99% people will say no, because let's be very honest, that days, I remember when I was, I turned adult, right? We still used to have banks where there were ledgers, they would take all physical notes. But I don't think there's anything which is done physically today. Everything is on IT. It's all electronically driven. So I do believe it is an essential part of every organization. So profitability may define availability of budgets for initiatives, but it's not going to really stop what is the spend. And I do believe that I would say a matured management will always understand that some of the initiatives are absolutely necessary, and they have to be taken care, regardless of even if you have a bad year. It's like I may have a bad year, right? But I will still buy a medical policy. Why? Because God forbid, in a bad year, if I fall sick, that's a double whammy, and I don't want to do that. For a fraction of a cost, if I can secure my health and my family's health, it's still worth the investment. So I think from that perspective, management will still see a side to it.
Perfect. The next question comes from Amitabh Bhardwaj. When we talk about cybersecurity domain, it's a cat and mouse race, right? How do we plan a budget ahead of an adversary, TTPs, to have more resilience in our organization?
I think good one. I think, yeah, what we are going to be breached, no one knows about it, right? So that is where I do believe it's a fine balance of your current set of tools, right? A very fair assessment of your risk exposure. You can
let's take that question. I mean, I've got another question. I think we can club that up.
Yes.
Let's apply. So that comes from Prashant. And if you can also give us a best practice in this case, to apply a cost benefit analysis in to risk assessment.
Okay. I think when I look at cost benefit analysis, right, as I said, every tool that I'm deploying, right, what is a measurable outcome, right? Every tool would have been in different forms of a journey, right? The previous question. And being honest to you, no tool, you can accomplish its true potentials in first year, right? Because every tool would have a maturity model. You may be starting at level 0, level 1, level 2, depending on your organization maturity, but there's a journey to reach the level 5 in whatever you do, right? And that is something that you all have to define. So if you break it down into measurable, outcomes, right? Your ROI is nothing but the metrics that are agreed with your management. Again, the key part is agreed with the management at the start of the year, right? This is what I'm making an investment for it. This is how I'm going to measure it, right? What is a tool going to achieve during the year, right? Identifying the true potentials of what the tool can protect, making sure that those are used in your environments. I'll give a very simple example is we all buy a mobile phone, right? When you buy a mobile phone, the advertisement talks about hundreds of features, right? How many of them you use? Hardly 1 or 2, right? Most of the times we limit ourselves to making calls or social media, right? There will be a lot of other features that remain unused, right? So when you're talking about return on investment, it's about making sure that you increase every bit of, available, right, opportunity with that existing deployment of a technology, right? When we do that, right, you would see that you are expanding your horizon for what you want to protect, right? You will see that when you start doing your third-party risk assessments, or you do your red teaming exercises, right? Or when you do your benchmarking, right? You would often see that there are not many, areas of void that you're seeing. Coming back to TTPs and all of them, you have tools today. You have BAS tools, right? Which would, help you simulate all your, existing controls. And, you could run a assessment. Now, again, BAS tools are not cheap. They come at a cost. But what it helps you to do is, when you talk about TTPs, You can create a snapshot of your various environments, right? And various scenarios. You could run a scan and it will exactly tell you what is the level of efficacy of your tools, the current controls. If it says 100%, it is congratulations, none of your controls are working, right? Then you have to start figuring out, and that's again a very good insight for you to then understand that, okay, fine, why are my controls not working? Because that's your current snapshot of all your controls. And for all, for the new threat vector, the way the BAS tools work, the attack path simulation tools work, I think there are many examples. Ajay, I don't want to name, but if you permit me, I can just name one, but I'm not promoting them. I'm not doing anything of. Simulate is one of the tool. The only reason I gave is if I was using a jargon, I just wanted to help people so that they can do a Google of their own, and they can find. Peakers is also one of those many tools. There are various tools in that segment, right? But what it does is snapshot of your current control environment. They apply all the TTPs and they come and tell you what is exploitable. They tell you what are the top vulnerabilities. They tell you what are the top weak controls in your environment. And that would also mean that you know exactly where you want to focus on. Some of this would mean you have to upgrade your infra. Again, it is where you'll have to work with your infra and pass on that feedback to them. I think this all is very important because for you to achieve a steady state of cyber hygiene, it's not only about what you are going to spend. It's also what the infra is going to spend. It's also what your application development teams are going to spend. A shift left is not what the application developers are going to do for you. So I think when you do that, you will see those areas and you can start working on them.
Okay, the next question comes on from Prasad. The driving security involves keeping us updated on automation and continuous research. How can we improve the balance of doing the researches and automation in-house or choosing OEMs? What are the areas we should prioritize to do in-house based on our capabilities? Additionally, what I would also want to ask out here is that, this is, when we talk about this aspect, we actually didn't touch is that, do we really focus on while budgeting to increase the in-house capability or really focus on, outsourcing the, security capabilities so that organization focuses on businesses and the security is taken care by the third party? So what is your thought process on that? And considering what the third party attacks are happening these days. So yeah, over to you.
I think I have a blank face.
Okay, I can give it a go.
No, I think it's a great question, right? Great because nobody is able to figure out. I'm sure everybody is struggling to find an answer. The challenge that I see with insourcing is its skills, its availability of people, right? It's attrition, it's a churn, right? So striking a fine balance there, it is still something, we have to figure out. So that is where, you'll have to really work on it. But a larger question of research, right? I do believe that this is something we have to be very diligent about it. Gartner has peer sites, right? Where every time you're evaluating a certain tool, you can really go there. It talks about various products. It talks about what are the pros and cons. There may be more such, tools. So if you're trying to do it in-house, my suggestion is please leverage on those, right? Also, what is very important is there are two ways you could be driven. I said, the largest pitfall for every CISO is we blindly go with what OEM sells us as a tool, right? It's like when you go to buy, let's say, a flat, right? Every developer will sell you that this property is going to become the Manhattan of the world in next 5 years. And we all know that even after 20 years, you're sitting where you're sitting earlier, right? That's a big gap, right? So what OEM does, it promises, it will promise you of a vision, right? And often, when I have the dialogue with them, I always warn them that, be careful about what you're selling me, because everything that you tell, I'm going to convert that into a KRA and I'm going to measure and I'm going to pay you only as per, whatever I'm able to realize on that, right? But that is not the question. The question is more about.
CISO will really tell this that whatever you tell me, I'm going to convert that into a KRA. I think there's a really good takeaway, Kalpesh bhai, on this. I think,
Yeah.
something which is really every security person should really focus when, irrespective when you talk about any kind of consulting activity or any kind of, OEM selling or product selling, whatever you say, is going to become your KRA. Is something which has to be noted, right from the evaluation stage to the implementation stage.
Absolutely. Why I'm saying, Ajay, this is important is I have seen many board discussions go very bad because, when you have to sell a product, right? So, we said, pre-budget or, when you're fighting for the budgets, we blindly copy paste whatever the OEM promises, right? I've told you n number of times, and I can repeat this, for n number of times. Our boards are very, very smart. They have eye for details. They capture a lot of data and they know exactly what they're approving, right? Again, elephant in the room, you might feel that you have sold something purely, you had no conviction about it. You blindly trusted the OEM, right? You didn't do your own research, you didn't do your own homework, and you blindly trusted the OEM. And OEM comes and tells, I just said these are the potentials, right? But for that to be accomplished, you have to make 5 more investments. And that is a place, you are between the rock and the wall, right? And you would see yourself played beautifully between them, right? To avoid that, the beautiful question is you have to do a due diligence. I can only tell you what you should not do. Never trust the OEM to define, what are the features you're going to accomplish. Let them not define what are the success criteria. If you have the skill sets, if you have the teams, please let them do it. If you feel that's a limitation, please engage with some independent third party, right? Especially when you're embarking on large projects, right? We heard, what if there are large projects like a zero trust or, or a SOC automation, right? Or, the XDR for your organization, right? They have far more implications, right? So in such cases, engage with your vendors. See, being honest to you, what has happened, and unfortunately is, there was a time when your vendor was your partner who would advise you on a journey, who would advise you not on tools, who would not sell you tools, but who would sell you or who would walk with you a path of how you could secure your organization. Unfortunately, that complete space has been replaced with OEMs, right? And that is a dilemma, and that is, where I see this as a risk. So currently, what we are passing through, my only submission and my only suggestion is, let OEMs not decide what your budget should be. Let OEMs not decide, what your selling points to the board should be. It should be a partner of trust who is more of a virtual CISO, right? Now, VCISOs are very, very common terminology. They're partners, who are general advisors on risk strategy, right? I do believe a lot of questions, Ajay, we are seeing is, I have spent money. Now my management is, why is management saying I'm not going to pay more than 30%? Because they feel, yeah, like I've been spending fortunes on this people. Where is outcome?
And they are not doing enough.
Yeah, they feel, where is outcome? मतलब इतना सब करने के बाद, right? The silliest of the silly things, you come back and say,
this is what the question which comes out to be, and I think this is what I wanted to take it up. Gunjan had asked this. How do you really perform the return on security investment?
Exactly. I think return on security investment is very easy, right? So you have to go back and say that, fine, during the year, the industry was facing XYZ threats, right? My investments over here made sure that we were not compromised. That is a proof, right? We have to do that. The challenge is, every time the industry faces an issue, we go back to them running, oh, we have to do XYZ more. Now that means our fundamentals were wrong. Because if you have invested so much, and being honest to you, I sit even on the, I sit as a side of the board as well. And the dilemma is, if everything that comes in the industry, if somebody is to come to me running and say, oh my God, we never have protection for that. For everything, if you go and tell that, the next question is, what were we doing with all the budgets that we spent? Right? So return on security investment has to be multifold, but if you have to convert that into tangible, you have to convert that in terms of what is happening in the industry and how are we protecting our organization. That's where your SIM logs, or your WAF logs, or your firewall logs, or your XDR logs will help you to say that these are the kind of incidents that were stopped, right? It will also help you to say mitigate. These are the kind of risks that we saw. But let's say you had a beacon, but you were able to top the CNC communication. It is a very evident proof to say that we could have been compromised, but we have topped all of this, right? Your return on security investments would be tools like your simulate, or your benchmarking could be various ones, right? Your your return on investments, right, would be all about your dark web monitoring services and the number of attempts and the number of let's say qualified takedowns you're able to take care of it, right? A culmination of all of them and reporting back to them. But again, I have been repeating this, but I just want that to be nailed in everybody's mind is we have to talk the language of the board, right? When you talk about ROSI,
Okay,
we just
now
cannot.
this is a question which I think we should bring it up. That the question says that though the ultimate liability comes to the board or a senior management, but the justification or the due diligence and due care is on the techies and the CISOs. I think we addressed this, but I think at this point it's better to refresh this question. That and a techie has to really focus to really make sure that this is a right investment, right? So what is your expectation from an ideal techie, from a being a senior management, besides what they should be telling you? As a CISO, you have your own team. What they should be telling you from a business angle to justify all the security investments which are being happening.
Okay, I have a different view. I have a contrary view on this, right? I just believe every transition, right? So CISO was always a function that was never part of the boardroom, right? Now it has a place in the boardroom. It's like when I move from a school to a college, right? I wouldn't expect the college to adapt to me. I would adapt to the college, right? Similarly, when we have a seat in the boardroom, it is us who have to adopt the language of the board, right? Or the language of the management. And that's the reason I believe it's not, and I do know, including me, right? I was wrong when I just thought that I'll only talk about cyber and not care much about the business, dimension of it. But we have to convert them together. Let's be honest, right? There is a RASI metrics, right? End of the day, if you have a seat in the boardroom as a cybersecurity expert, right, or a subject matter expert, your neck is on the block. And I have been in instances, Ajay, where a question was asked when things go wrong, who should be fired? And without even a blink of hesitation, I've always raised my hand, me, right? I think that's where I think that's a transition of being cybersecurity experts, from being cybersecurity experts to being cybersecurity leaders, right? Leaders is about taking accountability. It's about taking large responsibilities, right? It's being about part of the
you're
solution.
saying that irrespective of the team which you have or the organization which you have, it ultimately boils down to the responsibility of the senior management to ask the right questions. Even if it's a cybersecurity leader or a management leader, doesn't matter. They are responsible to ask the right questions so that security functions in the best way.
There is no wrong question, by the way. Every question is a right question. I do believe it's more about understanding what does a leader do, right? There's a difference between leader and a manager. I know we are top of the hour, but 2 minutes on this is a manager will manage the situation, right? A leader will create a circle of influence, right? A leader will create a following for themselves, right? A leader will ensure, right, that the vision they see is in sync with what what the industry requires, what the organization requires, what the nation requires, right? They're ahead of the times, right? So when you look at yourself as a leader, right, you will not find reasons why it has failed. You'll find solutions to why it has failed, right? And what are we going to do to address them going forward? And I do believe that's where accountability gets in. That's where the confidence to raise your finger and say that it's because of me, because then it goes on to say, being honest to you, when you raise your finger, it doesn't mean that they're going to fire you. Yeah, they can fire you, but it's more of taking the ownership, right? It's more of telling your own self that, boss, when things go wrong, you cannot find reasons and you cannot find punching bags, or you cannot find objects where you can put them under the bus. when we take the accountability. Because let's be honest, right? A CEO tomorrow comes and tells, I was a CEO, right? But the profitability was always a job of a CFO. They screwed up whatever they did. Now don't make me accountable on that. We are going to laugh at them saying, boss, you are the CEO. I don't care who does what. End of the day, it was your
Right.
duty. So why do we take that distinction, and why are we taking that exception in the CISO role? Anything on security, even if the business screws up, IT screws up, right? The buck stops with us, and it should always stop with us. If it stops somewhere else, right, we have failed to establish ourselves as leader in that organization. Ideally, that is I said I have a very contrary view, Ajay, on this.
But I think
No
this is
intention to offend.
quite understandable, and this is something which is really very required to be understood by the leaders, especially the security leaders, because we cannot say at the end of the day that management does not listen to us. So it's either the management we are not able to answer the management questions, or we were not capable enough to really deliver the business value to what the security needs to do.
Yeah, I think I had picked some brains of some of the the industry stalwarts, and
We are just 5 minutes away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think I just set this context, right? And we normally, I know, as somebody who's very enthusiastic and excited about driving cyber agendas for the industry, when I pick up the topics, right, they had the same dilemma, right? That take accountability, take responsibility, right? And they say that as a stakeholder, even a chairman of a very large bank doesn't find it easy to sell their vision to their stakeholders, but they don't. Persistence and perseverance is what is a quality that they have built. So trust me, if you think you are the only ones who are facing the challenge, empathize with your CEO once, right? You'll realize that your CEO wants to spend 1 lakh and they get a budget of only 100 rupees. Still, they have a smile on their face. Still, they're able to achieve and they deliver on the outcomes, right? So if your CEO is not an exception to the rule, expecting that you would be an exception, or getting disheartened about what is happening at your end, I think it's not even worth it, right? So I just hope that kind of addresses.
I think that's we have a lot of questions, but I will park it from here. We are really short of time. We have other things to do.
Here is a tip. I'm available on LinkedIn. I accept all the invites. So very happy to connect with all of you. Just do a look up on Kalpesh Doshi on LinkedIn. And if there's anything where you feel I can help you, I'm
Please
always
feel
happy to
prepared
contribute
to
that as a
ask.
fraternity.
Thank you, Kalpesh sir, for this. And over to you, Iqbal.
Okay. So yeah, it is well said that knowledge is alone not a power, but the sharing of knowledge is when the knowledge becomes powerful. And I think both our speakers today, Kalpesh sir and Ajay sir, believes in this. Thank you so much, Mr. Kalpesh sir, for sharing out such an in-depth knowledge about the topic, and Mr. Ajay sir for delivering it. And I'm damn sure this 2 hours would have been extremely well worth the time to all the audience.